My name is Kelly Staten, and I'm a programming manager here at the Johnson County Public Library. And I just want to say welcome to our first ever virtual Authors at JCPL event. We had hoped to have Brad in person, but things changed with COVID-19. But we're really excited that he agreed to come and do a virtual visit with us. Just a reminder, you can order his book through Wild Geese Bookshop, and I'll drop a link to order that book in the chat in case you haven't ordered your copy of Near Dark yet. They have graciously allowed us to partner with them to sell books, and we just love Wild Geese. So make sure you pick up a copy of Near Dark at Wild Geese through the link or in person. If you need it later on, just let us know and we'll be happy to share that too. So I'm going to introduce Brad now. I believe he's on here. Brad Thor is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of Backlash, Spy Master, and The Patriot. Many of his titles have topped best of thriller lists. And in 2008, Brad actually shadowed a Black Ops team in Afghanistan to research his thriller, The Apostle. He also served as a member of the Department of Homeland Security's Analytic Red Cell Unit. Brad has been called the master of thrillers, and his novels have been published in over 30 countries. And we're so excited to have you, Brad. Thank you for joining us virtually.
It's my pleasure, Kelly. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm glad we're able to do it this way.
I know, it's so exciting. So why don't you tell us what you've been doing during this strange and unusual time?
Lots of reading. You would think that we would have exhausted all the books in our house within 4 months, but we have got shelves and shelves of books, and we're finding books that we had wanted to read a long time ago and never got to. And it's almost like this treasure hunt. We'll go along the shelves and, hey, here's what we haven't read. So it's kind of fun. We're doing a lot more board games with our teens, and everybody in the house is reading. So as an author, that makes me very happy.
That's exciting to hear. So what's your tour been like since it's mostly virtual? How is that different for you, and how are you connecting to your readers?
Well, so I always say that the readers are the people that I work for, Kelly. So they're my bosses. So the tour is really an important part of what I do every year, to get out and see my employers and say, how am I doing? Get my annual performance review. But what is kind of nice is that while I can't go out to bookstores and libraries in person, what we're seeing is a lot more people are tuning into the virtual events than would have, gotten in their cars on a Sunday afternoon and driven down to the library for the event or whatever. So it's really worked out very well. I think we're probably reaching even more of our existing readership and attracting new readers in. So that's been the silver lining through all of this with these wonderful virtual events. Plus, I don't have to leave home. I don't have to get on an airplane. I just come in my office, turn the lights on, turn the computer on, and we're ready to go. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it seems pretty easy. So we're here to talk about Near Dark. Came out this week. Do you know if it's going to top the bestseller list or not? I don't know when that number comes out.
You normally find out late Wednesday afternoon after the first week on sale. So this coming Wednesday, I would knock, but I can't. Well, I guess I knock on the floor, knock on wood. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday. But there's been, it's the neat thing. I've been watching the bestseller list and everything. And right when we kind of went into the lockdown in March, book sales dropped a little bit because everybody was glued to their TV. And I think now everybody's sick of watching TV, and book sales have gone like this. So that's kind of a nice thing to see happen, that books are, even in this difficult time, continue to provide an escape for readers.
I completely agree. I did so much reading while we were on our stay-at-home order, and I got ahead on my Goodreads goal, so that was really exciting. So let's talk about the plot of Near Dark. This is book 20 in the series, correct?
It's book 20 for me overall. It's 19 in the series. One year I did 2 books, and the second book was a spin-off about an all-female Delta Force team called the Athena Project. And technically Scott Harvath's in it, my protagonist, but it's a kind of a cameo role. So I tell people, Kelly, that my books are like the James Bond movies. You don't need to have ever seen a James Bond movie to go to the theater and enjoy the most recent one. And that's very true with my novels. So even though I've got 19 out there with the same protagonist, if you want to start with Near Dark, the one that just came out this week, you absolutely can. You don't need to have read any of the previous books. So if we kind of stay with that movie analogy, if Near Dark had a movie poster, the tagline on it would be, $100 million bounty has just been placed on the head of America's top spy. And that's what this story is all about.
I read it. I finished it this week, and I had not read a book by you before. And I really liked the fact that I didn't need to read all the others in the series. You could just jump right in anywhere. And that was just a really nice selling point, I thought, for the novel.
I appreciate, you know, it's tough. Thank you for saying that, Kelly, because I write each book as if the people coming in are new. And it's funny because I had somebody complain, why do you always give, you know, that little backdrop or background about your character? And I say, well, because, you know, there's new people that are coming to the books every day. And in fact, with this, and I don't want to get too far ahead of where your questions may be, but one of the things that I'm so excited about this book is I wanted to create a female character that was just as good as my protagonist, if not maybe a little bit better. And that was the big challenge I set for myself with Near Dark, is to really create someone who was just as skilled, but also possessed just as troubled of a past as my protagonist Scott Harvath did. So coming up with that idea about a $100 million bounty being placed on his head and him not being able to trust anyone, you know, as an author, that at some point he can't operate completely alone. He's going to have to trust somebody. And that's another neat angle, because I've got about 60% male audience and 40% female. And that female portion of my audience has been growing like crazy. And so with my Norwegian spy, I'm mixing up the letters, Solveig Kolstad, that I put into this book, she's a great, great character. And I expected to hear from my female readers, boy, we really like her. And I have. But what's surprising is all my male readers that are like, she's awesome. You need to give her her own book.
Yeah, I think she was one of my favorite characters too. She's such a strong female character. And was there anybody that inspired you to base that character on as you were writing?
That's a great question. So I'm lucky because I am surrounded in my personal and my professional life by absolutely brilliant, super talented women, whether it's my wife, my daughter, my editor, my agent, the VP at my company. So female characters in my books have always been integral to Scott Harvath being able to achieve his mission. Without them, there is no successful completion of the task that he has to get through the book with. They've never been window dressing, and that is a part of me having these brilliant women around me. I want to create characters that they want to read. I want to give my daughter in particular multiple characters that she could say, wow, that's something to aspire to. I like what this character in this book of my dad's was able to do. So yeah, so it isn't just one person, it's the collection of women who are closest to me. And this is, it's meant to represent them and the high esteem and respect with which I hold them.
I think you've done a great job of that, and I'm sure they definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
So it seems like our main character is always got someone that's trying to kill him in this book.
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I came up with this idea a while ago, it was hard to figure out how to execute the novel, Kelly, because somebody who's as well trained as Scott Harvath is, if he doesn't want you to find him, you're not going to find him. Unless he's telling somebody where he's going and that person's betraying his whereabouts, you're never going to find him. He's going to take his phone, he's going to chuck it in the ocean. There'll be no way to track him. And so I had this problem of, well, okay, this is great. There's a $100 million bounty on his head. The person who's placed the bounty tells the middleman, don't just give it to one assassin, give it to all your assassins. And whoever gets to him first gets to keep the money. And so I have a great network of contacts in special operations, in the intelligence community, law enforcement that I've built up over about 2 decades of doing this career. And I went to somebody, one of my favorite people in my network, who's like, they're all super smart people, men and women, brilliant. This guy is off the charts. And I call him scary smart because he's so smart. And I said, if you had $100 million bounty placed on you, where would you hide? What would you do? And he's like, whoa, Brad, stop right there. He goes, you're already making a big mistake. I don't hide. Scott Harvath would not hide. He said, you're already thinking that Scott Harvath is the mouse and the person who put the bounty on him is the cat. He goes, I would never allow myself to become a mouse. I am always the cat. He said, I would reverse engineer this. I'd figure out who the person or persons were responsible for putting a price on my head. They become the mice, and I don't stop hunting them until I put them all in the ground. I was like, oh, I'm glad this guy's on our side in the United States, And it was such an intense but correct response, I thought, because anybody who has the training that my character does, that's the exact mindset he would have. So when the book opens, as you know, he's at a very low point in his life. He's lost some people very close to him. He's very broken, doesn't know if he wants to go on personally or professionally. And he's down in Key West, what I've described as a alcohol-fueled slow motion suicide. And two guys walk into the bar, and no matter how long you're out of the special operations game or the spy business, your instincts and your training never leave you, Kelly. So if something catches your eye that doesn't look weird, you can't ignore it. You can't. It's just, okay, I now need to figure out why these two people that walked into the bar are bugging me so much. What is it about them? It's if your life depends on those kinds of analyses, you're never going to, you can't strip that out of your system. It becomes woven into your DNA. So that's where we open up. The bounty gets placed on Scott Harvath. He's in this bar in Key West, and a couple of very interesting characters, let's say, walk in the door, and it captures attention like that. And his head swings to the side, and the game is afoot. It's on. The fuse is lit.
And it doesn't slow down from there. So are there any movies in the works based on Scott Harvath?
Well, so we have a deal in Hollywood. We put together an awesome team, huge producer and director, and then coronavirus slowed everything down. But it's all the other stuff that you can do right up to shooting. So you can be writing scripts and all that kind of stuff. So we've been busy behind the scenes, and we are excited, as I think everybody is, for the virus to either burn itself out or for us to get a vaccine, so that not just Hollywood, but all the other people that we love and care about, our fellow citizens, can get back to work and reopen their businesses. So
if you had a current actor that you would like to play this character, who do you think that you would pick for that?
So that's a great question. So we talked about this in Hollywood, and the debate we were having really wasn't a debate because we all agreed on the answer, but there's two questions that we were asking when it comes to an actor for Scott Harvath. Should the star make the movie, or should the movie make the star? So you think about Sean Connery, the first James Bond, nobody really knew who Sean Connery was before that. And from that moment forward, he was always James Bond. So we agreed that we would rather have a relatively unknown, kind of the American Sean Connery, if you will. Doesn't mean this person has never acted before, but the person's probably not going to be a household name, because we believe the movie should make the star. Because all too often, if you take a famous actor that's maybe been in a couple of your favorite movies, it's hard for you to wrap your head around this person now becoming this iconic action character. And so we want to find a fabulous actor, put that actor in the role of Scott Harvath, and then from that point forward, whenever you see him, you're like, that's Scott Harvath, as opposed to, I liked him in that rom-com where he helped at the doggy rescue center and he fell in love with the girl that lost her dog, and he helped. You don't want to do too much of that crossing over. Some actors can pull it off. Some actors are really good. Like Matt Damon was fantastic as Jason Bourne. So I'm not ruling it out, but right now the way we're going about it is we want to take a relatively unknown actor and put them in that role. But that can change. Sometimes a movie studio will say, nah, you know what? We've got this person we've been working with and we want you to use fill in the blank with a famous actor. We want George Clooney to be Scott Harvath. And he loves your books. I mean, who says no to George Clooney, right?
It'd be awfully hard, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You're kind of in there.
My wife would not let me say no to George Clooney. I'd mysteriously die in my sleep if I said no, and then she'd be the widow in charge of my estate, and then bingo, George has got the role. So I just don't want it to go that far.
Yeah. So, moving a little bit away from Hollywood now, I read that you had only intended your character to just kind of be a one-time novel. So, what made you decide to extend his life throughout 19 books?
So also another great question. I grew up reading Frederick Forsyth, John le Carre, Robert Ludlum, Tom Clancy, and obviously there were some repeat characters there in that genre. I also like Michael Crichton a lot. And so when I sat down and wrote my first novel, I was looking forward to now picking a new protagonist for the second one, and so on and so forth. Crichton had a couple books that were that had sequels, but for the most part, they were standalone books where you didn't necessarily see that protagonist again. And I thought, okay, this is fun because you can revisit a new protagonist with different issues, different problems, that kind of a thing, different background every single book. And my editor said to me, we're getting all this great feedback about Scott Harvath. People love this character. People are going to find you and burn your house to the ground if you don't bring him back. You have to bring him back. And I'm like, I don't want to. And she asked me a great question, Kelly. She said, Brad, how many books have you read in the last year with series characters? And I went through, I listed all this thing. And she's like, wow. So what happens when you find a character you like? You keep going back to that author. And I said, yeah. And she said, have you ever picked up a franchise book by an author you love with a main character you like or love, and you've read the jacket and the story was set someplace maybe you're not that crazy about, okay? Maybe it's in, I'm not going to pick anything because I don't want to get yelled at by a tourist board for another country or someplace that I might not say is super cool. But she said, would you still read that adventure even if the setting was not what you wanted? And I said, of course, I love these characters. I want to go on another ride with them. And she said, bingo, there you go. This is why you need to bring Harvath back. You've got already, after your first novel, you've got all these fans clamoring for the next one, and you'd be foolish not to keep him going. And it was great advice. And my agent echoed that. So like I said, I'm surrounded by brilliant people, and my editor, Emily, is one, and my agent, Heidi, is another. And they both said, again, you'd be so foolish not to keep them going. And I did. And so I'm glad. And I think the readers are super glad too.
I think so. So I see there's a couple questions in our chat about Athena team and Athena Force. The readers are wanting to know if you're going to have any other titles that feature that team.
Right. So be careful what you wish for is what I always say. Because I always say, oh, if I'd only had more time in my year, I could write a second book. Well, guess what I'm blessed with now? Tons and tons and tons of time. You know, if it's not a trip for the touchless grocery store pickup or takeout food, I'm at home. So I've got time to do another one. So I think that that's very much going to be in the works. Part of what I want to do when I look back on the time that we've been in quarantine, the lockdown, the stay at home, whatever you call it in your own families, I want to look back on this time and say, I used it wisely. I spent even more quality time with my family. I developed certain things in myself and came out of this a better person, better author. And I'd like to actually have more than one book after having been in lockdown. So that is my goal. I've got a little passion project that is a thriller, does deal with spies, but it's outside the Scott Harvath and Athena project universe. And I've been wanting to do it for years. And I think it could be a huge, very successful book. But it's a story, even if it isn't, it's a story that's inside me that's been like clawing, like it's like I have Wolverine inside me with those big long metal, fingernails, like digging to get out. And I think that's probably the first thing that I'm going to do once I'm done with my virtual book tour. I think I'm going to throw myself into that passion project I've wanted to do. I've already started writing the next Harvath book. And so this may be, I've done 2 books in a year. One year I did a Harvath and the one and only Athena project book. So the goal for me is this year, can I manage my time? Can I create enough balance to get maybe 3 books out, including an Athena project? So that's something I'm looking at and considering.
All right, well, that should make people very happy. I want to know about your research project. It's really fascinating to me that you've actually gone to Afghanistan and kind of shadowed some of these Black Op groups. Can you tell us more about that and share anything like exciting that happened while you were there?
So best fried chicken I ever had was in Jalalabad. I'm no kidding. It was fantastic. Let's see. So I went in 2008 to Afghanistan, and I got invited by a team, and they said, "How would you like to see a little bit of what your main character Scott Harvath actually does for a living? Get to see some of the real stuff." And I thought it was fantastic. My wife said it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. If you want to go do it, do it. You know, my job is not to say no if this is something you really want to do. And so went. Heard gunfire. We were never shot at, and we were very low visibility. We weren't driving around in an armored vehicle. It was an SUV, but filled with guns and all sorts of stuff. I mean, and one of the things is that these guys didn't want me wearing sunglasses because they said nothing pegs you as a Westerner more than a pair of sunglasses, because the Afghans don't walk around wearing sunglasses, and they can see you from really far away when you've got the sunglasses on. There's something about it, and they know, okay, here comes some Western guys. But they also had the local clothing and stuff that we could put on. So there are these shawl-like things and these what were they called? Salwar, kamzi. They're almost like, I don't want to insult the local dress by calling it pajamas, but it's like scrubs, almost like hospital scrubs, and they're in either a khaki or a brown kind of color, and then they've got these blankets, and then they've got these hats they would put on. I grew a big beard before I went. That was the one thing they told me: get in shape and grow a beard, because if you have to run, we want you to be able to run far and fast. And then the beard is a sign of virility in Afghanistan, a sign of masculinity, and it also helps you. It also helps you blend in too, because if you're clean shaven, it's very likely you're Western. So if you've got the beard on and you're ripping down the road real fast and you're wearing the local Afghan clothes, you might not look. The first instinct might not be, hey, there goes a truck full of Americans, you know. So that kind of stuff was neat. I met a lot of really wonderful people in Afghanistan. That's probably what blew me away, was how kind the people were, how good the food was. I actually thought I'd come back like 15 pounds underweight, and I ate like a king. It was so delicious. It was really, really good. And we spent a lot of time in villages, and we would only go to a village where the village elders had invited us to come, because there is a code of honor among particularly the Pashtun people in Afghanistan, and it's called the Pashtun Wali. And if you're invited into their village, you are now protected by them, and they will fight to every last man in the village to keep you alive. So it was this, I tried to get somebody, Kelly, on the way to the airport when you've got a flat tire to pull over in the rain to help you change that tire, right? And you know, in the United States, and here's a whole village of people that because you're their guest, they will fight to protect you and keep you alive. So those are just a few of the things. It was really a neat trip. I took tons of pictures. I've got some of them up on my website. We did a neat little slideshow of some of my favorite ones. In the blog section at bradthor.com. But it was a once in a lifetime experience. Really, really neat. And only at the end, by the way, and I'll throw this last piece in, only at the end did these guys admit to me that they had rented a hotel room for 2 weeks for me in Kabul, because they said sometimes people get off the airplane and freak out and go, what did I do? I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And their thing is if you freaked out, we were going to tuck you into that hotel, and we weren't going to do anything with you until we came back in 2 weeks, and then we put you on a plane home. So it was kind of funny that they had reserved a room for me, but they're like, nope, you did it. You went everywhere we went, and good for you, Thor. You didn't chicken out.
Well, you did work for Homeland Security, right?
I was invited to be part of something called the Analytic Red Cell Unit. After 9/11, they realized that those attacks had been successful because we weren't creative enough as a nation. That the politicians and all the people in DC kind of had the same mindset all the time, and they needed to break out of that. So they decided, let's bring in some creative thinkers from outside Washington to help us brainstorm and war game some different scenarios. And so they invited me, my dear friend, who's also a wonderful thriller author, Brad Meltzer, Michael Bay, the director of the Transformers movies. And so they brought us in to help figure out where America might be vulnerable, what the attacks might look like, and also where Americans overseas might be in danger. So it's a pretty neat thing. And I came up with an attack scenario in there. I jokingly refer to the Red Cell Unit as the Las Vegas of government programs, because what happens in the Red Cell stays in the Red Cell, like they used to say about Vegas. So I could never use any of it for my books. That was the agreement. I could use my brain for them the way I put my books together, but I couldn't take any information out of there. And my dad is a no longer active Marine. So I was serving my country not by offering to pick up a rifle like my father did as a United States Marine, but by offering to use my creativity to help the government stay 3 to 4 steps ahead of the bad guys. And that was an incredible honor.
Sounds really fascinating. I just have a couple more questions before we go into our readers' questions and the people in the chat here. So you're 19 books into the series. How do you keep your storylines and ideas fresh?
That's a great. So Stephen King once said that a writer is someone who's trained their mind to misbehave. And that's very much the way my mind works. It's constantly looking at something and saying, what if? So I'm a voracious consumer of news. So not only do I read like crazy, but I also read fiction and nonfiction, read books like crazy. I also consume the news constantly. And I'm always tinkering with stuff and kind of turning it around in my brain saying, well, what if it was this way? What if we're being told is not exactly the way it is? Or what would this story look like if you flipped it upside down? So a lot of my stories are inspired by what's actually happening in the world or what I think may be about to happen. That's one of the things that I pride myself on, is being able to kind of peer over the horizon to say, you know, all these things are coming together. It looks to me like this is going to happen. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe 6 months from now, a year from now. And that's where I get a lot of inspiration for my ideas. It's if people say, the question I love the most, Kelly, is people say, where do you get your ideas? And I say, in the shower or on my couch after the second glass of wine, because that's when I'm most relaxed. And I love I read like constantly. Like I said, I also like TV that's very well written. So there's the Showtime had the drama The Affair, I thought was really well written. Ray Donovan is another series that I thought was really well written. And when I can slip out of my own kind of, it's the suspension of disbelief. When I can get sucked into a story and forget everything that's going on, sometimes that's when the ideas bubble up as well. There's something about switching my brain off, or kind of, like punching out and being off duty, that then the ideas come. It's a really weird thing, but if I'm relaxed, then it's just, they keep bubbling up. And I've got a pad in every room. When I used to travel back in the before times, I would always keep the little notepads that are by the phone and all that kind of stuff in hotel rooms. So I've got stacks of these, and I have them all over the place: the kitchen, the living room, my office, the bedroom, the bathroom, so that even if I'm brushing my teeth and I get an idea, I write it down right away because I don't want to lose it. So I try to create the most welcoming environment for the muse to enter into as I can. And when she arrives, I listen to everything she says. You ignore the muse at your own peril.
So do you have a favorite book? I'm sure they're all kind of like your children. You might not want to pick one, but I'm just curious if there's one that is your favorite or not.
Well, so you stole my line. I asked people, do you have a favorite child if you have more than one child? I will say this, my answer to that normally, Kelly, is that it's the next book, because I'm already working on it. So I'm really passionate about the next book. I found an idea that I love, and that's going to give me fuel to get through a year of writing. I am very proud of my last 2 books, Near Dark, this year's book, and last year's book, Backlash, because I took some really big leaps, some big risks as an author. I got into writing more about the inner turmoil happening with my main character, and that was really uncomfortable territory for me, because there's no manual that they hand an author to say, do this by page 3, make sure by the end of chapter 15 you've done this. And so you don't know, are you doing enough? Are you revealing enough of this inner turmoil? Is it too much? Is it going to turn off your readers? And you don't know if you've done it right or wrong until the book is complete and you've handed it off to somebody else to read. So I've taken a lot of risks as an author, particularly with these last 2 books. I always take risks, but I really got outside my comfort zone. And these last 2 books, particularly this year's book, Near Dark, have been 2 of the best reviewed books I've ever had, both from critics and my own readers. Last year, everybody said it's the best book you've ever written. I don't know how you're going to top it. And then this year they go, you topped it. Didn't think you could do it, but you topped it. And then they put the pressure on me for next year. Can't wait to see how you top it next year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're killing me. I'm glad everybody loves the books, but I probably put more pressure on myself to do that. But it's because the readers, like I said, are my bosses, and I want my bosses to be happy. So I take that stuff very seriously.
All right, well, we have a question from Jill. She wants to know what you love reading right now.
So I'll tell you what I'm reading right now. Because I am writing my next thriller, I don't read in my genre because I don't want, on some basis, it's some way in my mind to have somebody else's voice slip into my work. So I stay away from that. I am reading right now, and it's probably one of the two books, and they're perfect for the pandemic. One is Erik Larson's The Splendid and the Vile, which is all about London during the Blitz and how resilient the British people were and how well Churchill did to not let them lose heart and to keep them motivated, to see them through this terrible period of the war. So Erik Larson, Splendid and the Vile. And then the other one I'm reading is by the author of Black Swan. It's also a nonfiction book that's called Anti-Fragile by Nicholas Taleb. And it's a great book. In no language ever have we had a word that means the opposite of fragile. If I buy you a beautiful vase and I ship it to you from my home here in Nashville, Kelly, I'm going to stamp the package all over fragile, 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 fragile. There is no word we put on a package where I want you to shake it up. I want the UPS driver to kick it down the stairs, let it roll around the back of the truck, because the more that vase gets beaten up, the stronger it gets. And so this book, Anti-Fragile, is about taking it, and it was written like in 2011. And it's all about taking advantage of events like we're going through right now with COVID-19 and actually coming out of it stronger. While other people are kind of paralyzed, they don't know what they're going to do with their careers or their businesses or anything else, this book actually helps you look at things differently so that you can look at what everybody else considers to be a disaster and you can snatch success from it. So it just ended up that I have these two books and they couldn't be more perfect for reading right now. So those are my two big book picks for you.
All right, and now we have a question from Kurt. He wants to know if you're ever going to come to South Africa. There are many possible heroes and villains and plots.
I would love. So one of my dearest friends in college was from South Africa, and she has been telling me, whenever you're ready to go, I've got so many family members there. We're gonna plug you right in. You go to Cape Town and Joburg and all that kind of stuff. So Kurt, I would love to. In fact, the closest I've been is there was a channel called the Speed Channel, and they had a show called Dangerous Drives. And I went to Mexico City with an executive protection detail, bodyguards, to do research for one of my thrillers. And we had armored Suburbans and all this kind of stuff. And the other half of that show was about an executive and his guys driving him around in South Africa. So that's about as close as I've been to South Africa, as I've shared a TV show with somebody else, bounced back and forth between Mexico City and South Africa. So I heard it's gorgeous, and they've got some great wine down there, so I would love to go sometime.
Pat wants to know how the recent events in the country are affecting your upcoming writing.
So that's a great question. One of the things I've been saying is, people have said, a question I've been answering is COVID going to be in your next novel? And my answer is absolutely not. My job is to let you escape. I'm trying to give you a great thrill ride and a great escape from coronavirus. And also, can you imagine spies trying to be socially distant? How do you trade secret information, Kelly, if you're wearing a mask or you have to be 6 feet apart? And also, probably another really good reason why I'm not going to address it. I want people to be able to slip into this fantasy world that I create and have it be like it was before COVID-19. I wrote a book about a pandemic about 6 books ago called Code of Conduct. And it opened with, if the president could get the virus, then Americans realized no one was safe. And that was the opening for Code of Conduct. So I've already written about. Yeah, a little bit. It's fun when some stuff comes true. Not so much fun when other stuff comes true. Be careful what you wish for. So it has, though, the whole COVID thing really has kind of jumbled my radar a little bit, my ability to see what's coming next. because everything has to be filtered through COVID now. Like, what's going to happen here? What's going to go on with the Chinese or the Russians, and how are they dealing with coronavirus, and so on and so forth. So it's a challenge for me to kind of pick what's going to happen next. But what I love about my current book, Near Dark, is that it is such a good escape from the COVID era. There isn't anything in there that you'd read it and go, well, how would they do that with coronavirus and blah, blah, blah. The storyline and everything isn't dependent on whether there's a pandemic or not a pandemic. And it just works. And I think me putting in, so I used to have a travel show on public television before I was an author. And I was the host and the writer. I'm a huge traveler. I love to travel. And that's part of the fun of my books, is you get to escape to different places around the world. And one of my favorite spots, and I've always wanted to put it in a novel, is Mont Saint-Michel in France. And that's what's on the cover. I don't know if I've got my screen mirrored or not. If you see it. So, okay. So anyway, but the Mont Saint-Michel is on the cover of the book. And it's a lot of fun because I've been there a couple of times. It's the neat thing about doing research for books. I was down in Key West. I was in Oslo, Norway, and other places. Part of the escape that I give you in my thrillers is you get to travel too. And I really try to immerse you in the local spots and all that kind of stuff. So back to Kurt. That question from Pat. Sorry, Kurt was about South Africa. That question was from Pat. So Pat, a lot of stuff is changing, and that's part of, I have to consume, I think, even more news and try to peer over the horizon to really nail next year's story, so that regardless of what happens, coronavirus, hopefully, knock on wood, will be gone. We won't have to worry about it anymore. We'll be back to normal. But I want to make sure that whatever story I come out with, it's going to be fresh, exciting, and timely. So I'm investing a lot of my energy right now, making sure that the plot for 2021 is going to nail that.
All right. Well, this one is a unique question. Aaron wants to know what your favorite books to read to your kids were.
Oh, that's a great one. Well, I'll tell you, I don't know that you want to read this in the middle of the summer, but Laura Ingalls Wilder, my favorite book, and it was a good sized book that we read to the kids. I think the correct title was, so she's the one, Little House on the Prairie comes from her and everything, but there's one called The Long Winter, about how their town got snowed in, and it was horrible, cold, tons of snow. The train could not get to them to bring supplies. How do they feed the horses? Do they have enough hay and the other animals and all this kind of stuff? And that was one of my all-time favorites to read. But my kids got out of us reading to them so fast. Like in kindergarten, my son read Harry Potter. I mean, it was amazing. We're always told that if we want our children to be great readers, we need to read to them. And while that is very important and it does build your bond with your children, when the book Freakonomics came out, they actually turned that on its head. And Freakonomics, the two authors of Freakonomics said through their studies, it wasn't necessarily how much you read to your children that made the difference. What made more of a difference was, did your children see you reading, and were there books in your home? That was the big thing. Were you modeling that behavior for your children? And then would you take them to the library and let them get books, but did they also see you checking out books? So it wasn't just something you were doing for them, you were doing it for yourself. And that sent such a good message. So but Laura Ingalls Wilder is a great example. My favorite is Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type. Cows Are Type. That and Duck Runs for President. They were Caldecott Award-winning books. Those were just fantastic. So if you've got a little one at home and you have not read them, Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type. Oh my gosh, are you in for something fun? That's a great book.
I'm sure our children's librarians will appreciate that. Teresa wants to know which book is being made into a movie.
So right now we are looking at, it's kind of coronavirus dependent. So that's one of the benefits of my books is that they're very international. So we can go anywhere to film them, but we have to pick if the coronavirus thing doesn't dramatically drop and Hollywood is fully open for business. It's interesting, before Kelly and I got together to do this Zoom today, I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal about Pinewood Studios in Atlanta and what they're doing to allow productions to come back, all of the coronavirus testing they're doing and of the staff every day. It's a fascinating article in today's Wall Street Journal. So we haven't picked the exact one yet, because we're trying to figure out what countries are open for business internationally and have low to no coronavirus. Like New Zealand is one place that doesn't have any coronavirus. So what book would we set in New Zealand? Would the New Zealand government be open to us potentially bringing a certain amount of people to work on the production? Plus, I'm sure the film industry in New Zealand would love to have a major production mounted down there. That's where they did all the Lord of the Rings movies and everything. Peter Jackson, the fabulous directors from there. They've got a lot of talent for post-production, for editing, and all this kind of stuff. So we're trying to be very careful. We're trying to pick a safe spot where we know the entire crew can be healthy and safe. We can shoot what we need to shoot there. But that's the great thing. They said, Brad, your books are like the Marvel universe, all the superheroes. You've got 19 Scott Harvath books, plus you've got the Athena project. It's just huge. We could basically go anywhere. So the world is our oyster. So to answer your question, Teresa, by avoiding answering your question, that's what I got for you right now.
And to kind of follow up on that, we have someone on Facebook watching. Amy would like to know if there are any hints on next year's plot.
No hints. No hints. I always joke that I don't want to give anything away. And it's possible that I might change something. I've done that before, where at the last minute I've decided, wait a second, world events are going this way, and I'm going to rework something in the book. So David Morrell, who is one of the founding members of the International Thriller Writers Association, who growing up I read his novels. In Rambo, actually, the Sylvester Stallone character in the films, Rambo was one of David Morrell's books. And David has a book about, he just changed the title, and I've called it Lessons Learned from a Lifetime of Writing, was what it used to be called. And now it's changed. He consistently reminds me, Brad, give the right, I should probably tape it to my screen so I give out the right. I don't know if you can find it, Kelly, but David Morrell. So he, did you find it by any chance? I saw you typing. I didn't know if you were.
Oh, I'm typing to let people know in the chat that if they want to ask questions that they should start doing so now, because we only have about 15 minutes left. So.
Gotcha. Well, so to finish answering that question about any hints for next year, David Morrell is really serious about never talking about the plot while you're writing the book. Because invariably, if you talk about it too much, every time you share a little bit, and I love to share. Once it's done, then I'm happy to. But David says that it's like currency. It's like rocket fuel. You need to propel yourself through the year of writing this book. And every time you talk about the plot, you're giving a little bit of that rocket propellant away. And you're losing a little bit of what it takes to get there. Plus, if I've learned one thing, I've learned it's like baby names. The minute you tell somebody what you're thinking about naming your baby, they say, oh God, I had an ex-boyfriend with that name. Boy, was he a jerk. Or I had this teacher at school that gave me so much detention. I'll never forget that name as long as I live. So with plot stuff, people go, oh, wait a second. I read about that in the one, James Patterson book. And so it takes away from what you're doing. So you actually have to be very quiet, very jealously guard that idea and not let anybody near it, except like people on a need to know basis. Your editor, your agent, that's like it. Other than that, it's whoop, and I don't talk.
All
so
right.
I hope that answers that.
One other question from Facebook. Peter would like to know how the relationship with Armin Schultz and yourself has grown over the years.
Oh, so Armin Schultz is the narrator for my the audio versions of my books, and he's awesome. So we love him. I remember the first time. So he's a Broadway actor, and so he can keep all the voices straight. He does great voices. He's got this great. I have a sample at bradthor.com. I actually have a sample on the page for Near Dark. There's an audio clip there. You can hear Armin's voice. I remember that he did like a cholesterol drug commercial, where he's in Central Park and he has this mirror, and as people walk up to it, the mirror radiates back their cholesterol number automatically. It's just some weird thing for this commercial. But I was in my kitchen cooking, and out of the corner of my ear, I could hear my character, Scott Harvath, was talking on my TV. I'm like, wait, that's Scott Harvath. And of course, it's not Scott Harvath. It's Armin Schultz, Army, doing a commercial. Armin is also in the television series with Rami Malek, who played Freddie Mercury, and who's the new Bond villain for Bond 25, I, Robot. So Armin Schultz is in I, Robot as well, and he's got a recurring role there. So if you like his voice and want to see what he looks like, you could binge I, Robot. But he's a great guy. We've gone out with him when he's been in town. He was in Billy Elliot. He had a role. He was on the road for Billy Elliot. And when we were living in Chicago and Armin came in the production of Billy Elliot, he got us tickets and we sat up close. It was really pretty cool. He's an awesome guy.
Bill would like to know if you've ever thought about writing a nonfiction book.
That's a great question. I'd have to have something I was passionate enough about and felt that there was a need in the marketplace that it didn't exist. At least with fiction, I know it doesn't exist because I haven't written it yet. But for a nonfiction book, I like history and I like reading nonfiction. I have to tell you, one of my favorites. So I read a lot about World War II, and I love the precursor to the CIA called the OSS. And my favorite, one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books. So we talked about Eric Larson. I'm reading Splendid in the Vial right now. I loved Eric's book In the Garden of Beasts, which was all about the run-up in the 30s to in Hitler's rise. And it was fascinating because nobody wanted the U.S. ambassador job in Berlin. It was a teacher from the University of Chicago. I went to a small liberal arts high school in Chicago where all of my friends today, I still have from that school. And I'd come out of a Catholic grade school and I went to a high school that had a lot of Jewish kids in it. And I got to go do high holidays and all. I joke I've been to more high holidays than I have Christian holidays. So what's always in hearing the stories, particularly when I would go to high holidays from grandparents and things like this about the persecution of Jewish people, not just in Germany, but other countries as well, always fascinated me. And I never really, I didn't understand how people could allow that to happen. It was always, I very much believe in justice, in fairness. And so I learned a lot from going to those high holidays. And then I learned even more by reading Eric Larson's book, In the Garden of Beasts. It was fascinating how many people were just turning their backs on what was happening and kind of burying their heads in the sand and pretending that it wasn't going on, whether it was media figures who were ignoring people being beaten up in the streets of Berlin for not doing the salute and that kind of stuff when the Nazis would parade by, to the State Department hoarding visas and not giving visas to these people who could have gotten out. It was a fascinating book. The other nonfiction book that's one of my all-time favorites is The Brenner Assignment by Patrick O'Donnell. And it's about the most audacious, most dangerous, most exciting plot by the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, in World War II, where they were trying to blow up a rail line in northern Italy that was helping supply the Nazis. And this book has everything, right down to a Contessa, gorgeous Contessa that hides a young American who's the head of this paramilitary kind of spy team, and they fall in love. And it's one of the greatest books. So if you haven't read In the Garden of Beasts, you haven't read The Brenner Assignments, I highly recommend those. But great question. Would I write a nonfiction? Probably not. I think I just love fiction. So, but it's a very interesting question. I love to read them.
Rachel would like to know how you found your writing genre, or did it find you?
That's such an excellent question. So it found me naturally, and I never understood how until I read Stephen King's book on writing. And in it, Stephen King says, nobody looks at the landscape of genres and says, I think I could do really well there. I think I could make some money if I write romance, or I think fantasy is where book sales are at. I'm going to write fantasy because then I can sell a bunch of books. What he says is you should write what you love to read because that's where your passion is. That's where you're going to be a great writer. And I extend that even further. I say, believe it or not, if you write where you love to read, you already have a mini PhD in that genre. You know a lot about that genre from having read in it for years and years and years. You know why certain books have done well, in your opinion, why certain books haven't, maybe why an author really blew you away with the book and surprised you. You get a feel for the tempo and the subjects and all that kind of stuff. Basically, you get to learn the rules so that you can go ahead and break them. And so it picked me. This is what I love to do. I would grab my parents' Ludlum's, Le Carre's, Freddie Forsyth, Clancy books. They didn't even hit the table. My mom or dad would finish a book and I'd snatch it up. I probably started reading that stuff way too young. But I couldn't help myself. And I was the kid all throughout the summer, flashlight underneath the covers. I read all the time. I had to be told no reading at the table, that kind of a thing. I always had a book going, always.
Me too. My
Good.
dad would take my books away from me as punishment if I did something bad. So I feel you there. I think this might be our last question. If anybody has any more, make sure you type them in the chat, or if somebody can check Facebook for me. Joshua says he's a huge fan, and he wants to know if you're writing the Scott Harvath screenplay or if you'll be an artistic supervisor.
So I am going to be an artistic supervisor. I don't write screenplays, and you want somebody who knows what they're doing, knows how to beat it out is a term that they use. And there's all of these little tricks and things you've got to do by page 3 and all this kind of stuff. It really is a specialty. So I'm smart enough to know that even though I could probably re-roof my house, I could probably do the shingle work. It'd be a lot quicker, a lot smarter, and probably cheaper in the long run to get a professional team in to do it than me doing it. So I'm a real big believer in surround yourself with smart, talented people, preferably smarter and more talented than you are, and then set them loose to do what they do best. That's the key really to success. If I'm a perfectionist, it would take me forever and I'd never be convinced that I got it just right because I haven't done a screenplay before. So my thing is, smarter people than me, more talented than me at their different positions, and just set them loose and let them just go be their best selves and be there to support them and be the guy that they can ask questions to, because nobody knows the Harvath universe better than I do. So.
All right, well, that looks like that was our last question. It has been lovely having you, Brad. Thank you so much for coming to JCPL virtually, and hopefully when this is all over, you can come visit in person.
It would be my pleasure. My wife used to live just outside Indianapolis when she was a drug rep years and years ago. So she would love to come too. So it would be my pleasure. And I want to thank everybody that watched today and shared this with us. But I particularly want to thank the library. Kelly, thank you for sharing your wonderful audience with me and allowing me to do this virtually.
All right. Well, thank you again. And goodbye, everybody. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.